北京时间7点整。
Romania International. You are listening to our 1-hour broadcast from Europe and Japan. On the internet at www.channel1. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms. Our programs are also available on TuneIn and via satellite Eutelsat 16A on 11,512 megahertz, vertical polarization, and 16 degrees east. Symbol rate 29,950 megasymbols per second. Standard DVB-ST, modulation ABSK, audio PID 510. We wish you good reception conditions.
Welcome, I'm highlighting this with the news, the headlines. Tuesday was a record day for Romania with 40,000 new cases of COVID-19 reported in 24 hours. The Romanian Senate and Chamber of Deputies started their first session of the year, and the first stage of the population and housing census is underway in Romania. With over 40,000 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours, on Tuesday, Romania set a new daily record since the start of the pandemic. 97 related fatalities were also reported, including 2 from an earlier date. Also, the number of patients in intensive care went up to 930. The fortnightly incidence rate in Bucharest is nearing 22 cases per 1,000 inhabitants, the highest level to be recorded in the capital city so far. Health Minister Alexandru Rafila says the infection rate may decrease between the 10th and the 15th of February. In other news, travelers to Romania will only have to isolate for 5 days, irrespective of their country of origin, unless they can produce a COVID vaccine pass, proof that they have recovered from the infection, or a negative COVID test result from the previous 72 hours. Also, the National Committee for Emergency Situations has established that contacts of people infected with COVID-19 will have to isolate for 5 days, irrespective of whether they are vaccinated or not. The Senate and the Chamber of Deputies on Tuesday held the first ordinary parliamentary session this year. The priorities of the current session include legislation in areas such as energy, justice, healthcare, and the economy. The number one priority right now is establishing the caps and compensations for electricity and natural gas bills, with Parliament to pass an emergency order recently issued by the government on a new support scheme for the population. During the new session, Parliament may also discuss the amendment of the offshore law, which would unblock projects to extract hydrocarbons from the Black Sea. Another priority on Parliament's agenda is the dismantling of a special department investigating crimes in the judiciary, as also requested from Brussels. The opposition Save Romania Union has filed a single no-confidence motion against the Liberal Minister of Energy, Petru Popescu. The first stage of a new population and housing census has kicked off in Romania. Lasting until the 13th of March, this stage involves collecting data from administrative sources and creating the needed databases. The second stage, to take place between the 14th of March and the 15th of May, will consist in a self-census, while in the third stage, between the 16th of May and the 17th of July, data will be collected through face-to-face interviews. As a first, citizens will have the possibility to conduct a self-census from their mobile phones, tablets, and computers. Because of the pandemic, the new census, which was due to take place last year, was postponed for this year, but a simulation did take place last March. A population and housing census is conducted in every EU member state. On Tuesday, Romanian President Klaus Iohannis had a telephone conversation with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky in the context of the 30th anniversary of the establishment of bilateral diplomatic relations. but also against the background of the worrying security developments in the immediate vicinity of Ukraine, in the Black Sea region. Iohannis focused on the rights of the persons belonging to the Romanian minority in Ukraine, especially regarding the protection of their linguistic identity. He reiterated Bucharest's firm support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as for its European and Euro-Atlantic aspirations. The Romanian head of state underlined his support for the policy of non-recognition of the illegal annexation of Crimea and praised Ukraine's responsible behavior in order to avoid increasing tensions. For his part, Volodymyr Zelensky thanked Romania for its vocal and active support in both the European Union and NATO. The United States has ordered the family members of its government employees in Belarus to leave this country, which has close ties with Russia, and warned against travel to the region amid tensions between Washington and Moscow on the Ukrainian crisis, Reuters said on Tuesday. According to the U.S. State Department, the decision was prompted by unusual and worrying intensification of Russian military activity near the border with Ukraine. The U.S. had already instructed families of U.S. diplomats in Kiev to leave Ukraine on the 23rd of January. On the other hand, Poland will help Ukraine with gas supplies and weapons in the context of the neighboring state facing the threat of a new Russian military intervention, as Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki said in Kiev on Tuesday. He added that resistance to Russia is important not only for Ukraine, but for the whole of Europe and NATO. And that was the news from Bucharest, Radio Romania International.
Bucharest gives up the color codes for COVID-19 infection risk. I'm Ana Maria Popescu with more in this report written by Stefan Stoica. European countries are beginning to lift the tight rules that have governed the fight against the pandemic. Denmark becomes the first European country to eliminate all domestic restrictions as of Tuesday, after putting a lockdown in place in December to prevent the spread of the Omicron variant. Danish authorities cancelled the remaining restrictions after reaching the conclusion that the disease caused by the coronavirus is no longer a critical threat. For the time being, Bucharest remains prudent and keeps restrictions in place as record numbers of infections are still expected. Some changes have been operated nonetheless with respect to the quarantine terms for SARS-CoV-2 patients. The head of the Department for Emergency Situations, Raed Arafat, announced that national authorities gave up the color codes for countries depending on infection risks. A new single rule for entering Romanian territory has been introduced instead, with a 5-day quarantine required for travelers without a European digital certificate or other corresponding documents. State Secretary Raed Arafat.
Asta este regula de acum. Deci vaccinat, trecut prin boală sau test PCR.
This is the new rule. Travelers are either vaccinated, recovered from the disease, or with a negative PCR test not older than 72 hours before entering the country or before takeoff for those traveling by plane. The quarantine rules after direct contact also changed, with people who had the disease in the last 90 days no longer required to isolate after direct contact with an infected patient. All other people having had direct contact with a COVID patient will isolate for 5 days, regardless of whether they are vaccinated or not. Mr. Arafat also said Romania will also introduce the European rule applicable as of February the 1st concerning the vaccination certificate. Specifically, certificates will be valid for 9 months for the fully vaccinated, with a booster dose required after this period if the certificate is to remain valid. The measure is compulsory for all EU member countries, but it only concerns travel across the Union. The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control has recommended the administration of a booster dose 6 months after the completion of the first vaccination cycle. For the time being, in Romania, the digital certificate is accepted upon entering the country and for access in shops, restaurants, and performance venues, including for people without the booster dose.
Local authorities in Romania have asked for solutions from the government regarding the huge increase in energy bills and for reforms for the application of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. I'm Natalia Simon with more in this commentary by Daniela Budu. The representatives of Romania's County Council Associations and the Romanian municipalities, cities and communes have asked for support from the government to ensure the co-financing of the projects run by the local communities, and have also asked for solutions regarding the huge energy bills received by institutions. During a meeting with the Prime Minister Nicolae Ciucă, the local authorities representatives have expressed their availability to be co-included in consultations related to the implementation of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, so that the funding should be adapted to the needs of the communities. They have warned that the failure to make the reforms needed to implement the National Recovery and Resilience Plan will turn the local communities into victims. During the discussions, the mayor of the city of Cluj-Napoca in the northwest, Emil Boc, has proposed that the guidelines for implementing the plan should be developed together with the local authorities because they know best the problems of the communities. Moreover, he has pointed out that Romania will lose money from the National Recovery and Resilience Plan if it does not make the necessary reforms. Emil Boc.
Există riscul ca România să piardă bani din PNRR dacă nu se fac reformele din PNRR.
Romania risks losing money from the plan if the ministers do not make the reforms required under the plan. The collateral victims will be the local administrations. These reforms are not made somewhere outside Romania. They are made by Romania and for Romanians. The reforms will make this country much more functional with benefits for every citizen, Emil Boc said. In turn, the mayor of Fugir in central Romania, Adrian Teban, has pointed out that soon smaller cities will no longer have money to pay energy bills, which have doubled and in some cases have even tripled. Adrian Teban.
În orașele mici și mijlocii, presiunea pe bugetele locale este foarte mare, odată cu creșterea.
In small and medium-sized cities, the pressure on local budgets is very high with the rising energy prices. Larger municipalities can afford it, but small cities are facing pressure, said Adrian Teban. Regarding the commune's problems, the local officials have also told the Prime Minister that in the future they will no longer have money to pay their employees and the commune will be left without employees. On the other hand, the government, through the Interministerial Committee coordinating the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, has promised to take steps to speed up reforms and continue efforts to implement the plan. Romania needs balanced modernization and development so that the investments available through the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, as well as the other European and national funds, should benefit in a fair and integrated manner all communities and all citizens, the Prime Minister said during the meeting. At the same time, he has reviewed the measures taken by the government to protect the population, the economic sectors and public institutions, such as the schools, hospitals and cultural institutions, from the effects of rising energy prices. And that was Radio Newsweek.
Focus on Romania. Coming up next on Radio Romania International, listen to Song of the Day. Andra will be performing the song called Time.